You are listening to Radio Ramadan 365 podcasts.
Chapter 24, Pursuing the Divine Encounter. What is the divine encounter, Shaykh Sam?
If you happen to be awake at Tahajjud and you've not either over or under-eaten the night before, and you're in a quiet place in your house, and there's not much going on around you, and you very slowly do your wudu, and go very deliberately through each motion of your salah. And you don't do each posture with the intent to get through it so you can do the next posture, but you actually pause in each posture. There's at the end of that, when you're sitting after you've made your salam, there's a sense of quietness. There's a sense of presence. But it's a companionable presence. You feel that you are not alone. That the degree to which you are present is the degree to which you get almost like an immediate sort of experiential feeling of a presence in the room. That's a tiny sip, tiny sip of the ocean called the divine encounter. The divine encounter is the experience of closeness with the Rabb, the experience of intimacy, the experience of connection, direct connection. It is not an experience that, for most of us, that we can maintain in our normal everyday engagement with the world, because our normal engagement with others and with life is about getting from them what we want from them and giving to them what they want from us, and trying to balance the books. So we're mincing through our lives, this very undignified kind of little dance, trying to keep them happy and trying to get happy ourselves. That means that all our happiness we've hooked to the outward, to the world out there, to other people. This sense of presence is not found there. You can look as long as you like. It's only to be found when you start sinking into yourself, start experiencing the spaciousness behind your eyes, and allowing that to percolate, to sort of seed in. That is a touch of experiencing the divine proximity. So when one speaks about the divine encounter, one must be very careful not to be too binary about this, because there are degrees of the divine encounter. There's a divine encounter that can be so intense, so overwhelming, so annoying that there's no space for the observer left at all. That your personhood goes up like in a puff of smoke. It disappears. That's not the only divine encounter that we have. We have little sips of the divine encounter every time we allow ourselves to get deeply quiet in a salah, or deeply quiet after a dhikr, or deeply quiet in muraqabah. So there's a degree of the divine encounter. In its extremity, it's questionable whether the person, the self, survives it. You go out, as I say, you disappear in a puff of smoke. When you experience the ecstasy, which is his nature, and you discover that is the essence of your nature, you no longer have any interest in appearing in the world at all. The world, your neediness of the world gets burnt. Your personhood gets burnt, disappears, turns to ash. Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. How do we do that?
How do we do that?
How do we access that realm?
So the you could say all of the practices of our deen are exercises in getting in experiencing the proximity of Allah. Because they all have the same effect. And the effect is that they help us to quieten our internal dialogue. They sort of, they silence the noise that's going on in our beings. And insofar as that it has that effect, what is already there becomes apparent. So, you don't reach divine presence. You can't escape divine presence. It's there. It is already, if it wasn't there, you wouldn't be. It is what sustains you. It is the life force of your life force. It is that which animates everything that enables you to be possible. So in that sense, you're not encountering, if we talk about the divine encounter, you're not encountering something like you would walk out into the wilderness and encounter a rhinoceros. It's not that kind of encounter. It is discovering what is there, not what is removed from you. You're sitting in the divine presence. You cannot be not sitting in the divine presence. You cannot escape the divine presence. So the question is, why don't we experience the divine presence? And the reason for that is that our beings are cluttered. We don't experience the spaciousness, which is the reality of our own, what is this side of perception, the inward, where the seer is operating out of. We don't experience the natural sort of quietude and depth and spaciousness of that reality, because we constantly talking to ourselves, and we're constantly talking to ourselves in such a way that keeps on directing our attention outward, because we're talking about, I mean, if you took a kind of a recording of the average person's internal dialogue, if we could design an instrument, like a kind of a camera that you stick through the person's ear, the saw what went on in there. I mean, the average human being, this would be a horrifying prospect. You'd run away screaming because you cannot believe what goes on in the average person's head. Even good people, and it's a rapid sort of churning of resentments, aspirations, needs, desires, musings, that cloud of noise traps your attention because it keeps on it doesn't, it leaves too little room for you to experiment with where your attention is coming from.
Mm.
It hooks you. It hooks you in the realm of aspiration and desire and avoidance and, all the things that keep us mincing through the world. So it is our internal dialogue which actually keeps our conditional motive and our conditioning in place.
Mm.
We've spoken about this before. To experience yourself as a self is to suffer. Because the self is nothing other than a bundle of issues relating to identity, which also then define conditioning and therefore conditional motive. This is a horrible way of being, Now, that bundle of things that you think that produce your idea of who you are, that gets sustained by your internal dialogue. I mean, if I'm walking down the road,
Mm.
let's say and I'm kind of looking at it as that's a nice car, and I walk a bit further and say, man, that man is ugly, and I say, ooh, that's a pretty girl, and what a horrible child, and we all do this. We're walking down, and then I muse about oh, I mustn't stay too long in the restaurant I'm going to because I've got an appointment, blah, 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 blah. If you're walking down exactly the same road and we were to sort of have a camera in your ear, what was going on in your head, maybe you will say, oh, what an interesting plane. Oh, that's a nice music shop. I must visit that sometime. Oh, doesn't that man have an interesting nose? That woman is, I mean, she's far too pretty. She's very self-conscious about this, Now, we think that as we're walking down the road, we're actually describing the world.
Mm.
We're not describing the world. Our internal dialogue isn't a commentary. It's a commentary on what we have come to make important in the world. Why is it that I looked at the car and not at the music shop?
Mm.
Why is it that I found the man ugly and you found him interesting? Why is it I found the woman attractive and you found her repulsive? We were looking at the same phenomenon, but the interpretation
Sure.
is completely different. In other words, as we walk down the street, our internal dialogue, our commentary on the world says nothing about the world. It says everything about what we have learned to make significant in the world. That thing about what we have learned to make significant in the world is informed by our conditioning. So it's actually the same thing as our conditional motive. It's the same thing as our personhood. I mean, I'm a person who likes women who looks like this. I'm a person who dislikes men who have big noses. You find men with big noses attractive. You find women who are pretty, a little bit sort of superficial. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Our commentary about what we're seeing says more about us than it does about them. It actually keeps our identity in place. Our ongoing narrative about the world keeps our identity in place and therefore keeps our suffering in place. We cannot experience the spaciousness which is our true nature because we're all the time evaluating, being worked and so on. So, internal dialogue is a problem. I mean, it's from one point of view, it is the one thing that makes us intriguingly interesting as human beings. But on the other hand, it is actually the source of all of our suffering, because it's the thing that keeps your nafs alive. It's the thing that keeps your personhood fed. Now, the question is, how does one quieten internal dialogue? Because, one way of phrasing this is a disabling way of phrasing this. It doesn't help. It's to silence internal dialogue. Like somewhere there's a switch in your consciousness that you can throw, and you've gone from having been noisy one moment to no thought the next. With that, maybe a 38 special has that effect, but nothing else does. There's no way, you don't silence internal dialogue, right? But the issue is that there is a dimmer switch.
Or is it a dimmer switch, or can you redirect it by asking other questions other than what you're used to asking yourself?
Well, as soon as you're asking questions, you're still talking.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example of how the dimmer switch works.
Yeah, sure.
This is not, so it's not an on-off. You can dial it down.
Dial it down. Okay. Let's do it.
Right now, can you identify a sound outside the building that you're sitting in?
Yes.
And can you rest your attention on that sound for a while? Maybe a few seconds.
Yep.
Okay. Now, can you find another sound?
Yep.
Right. You rest your attention on that for a few minutes. Now take your hand, take your four fingers. I'm assuming you're sitting in front of a desk.
Yep.
And rub your hand over the desk. Rub your fingers on the desk, and be very deliberate about trying to get a sense of the texture that you're feeling here. Feel the texture. All right. Open your eyes. How much are you thinking right now?
Not much, because I was feeling.
Do you see the point I'm trying to make? The dimmer switch is giving attention to something that's actually happening in the moment that you're in.
Yeah.
The Buddhists call this mindfulness. That's what it is. Giving attention to what's actually happening. When you give attention to what's actually happening, you have discovered the dimmer switch of the internal dialogue. It quietens the internal dialogue. Unless you are a very experienced practitioner, lots of salah, lots of muraqabah, you will not ever get to the point where or you'll rarely get to the point where it switches off completely, but you'll get it to quieten.
Yeah.
The degree to which it is quiet is the degree to which you experience the proximity of the Rabb. Because the Rabb is the presence that's always proximate, always there, that underlies that all of this noise sits on top of. So what does that mean about, how does one do this? It means that it is not just good enough to do salah. You actually have to do salah deliberately as an opportunity to practice quietening internal dialogue.
So I normally get that around Fajr time. After I pray Fajr, the contemplation, that dialing down, that quietness.
No, that's right. Yeah, because it's called like Fajr is like the spillover of Tahajjud, a very quiet time. Yeah. So, but the point is this: how often, and I think it happens to everybody. You get onto the masala, and this is now your debt is now due, so you're now going to pay your debt. It's like you're doing this thing to get through doing the things so you can get back to doing what you were doing before. You do your salah like that, then it's not going to be particularly useful. But if you do your salah and rest your attention on every posture, and do that posture with the intention to do it as well as you can, and allowing yourself to experience every aspect of the posture. Like in sajda, your face on the ground, your hands on the ground, your knees and your feet. Feel it. Then what will happen is that by the time you make your salam, you will be in a far quieter place than what you did when you did your takbir. So when you practice, any practice, when you do it by giving deliberate attention to what you're doing as carefully as you can, then that practice has the effect of quietening your internal dialogue. And the outcome of doing that is that you start to incrementally experience more and more the proximity of the Rabb.
Mm.
Because he's never not proximate, but you don't experience it because your attention's caught up in all of this fluff. Mm.
Mm. So you talk about the spiritual training as developing in increments. So in that sense, I suppose it's like other tracing in the world, like the physical and the professional. Is that what we should approach this like?
Yeah, I mean, so it is incremental. I mean, the
Mm.
one's inward inner depth and inward gatheredness is an incrementally growing experience. It is not the same thing as competence.
Mm.
It is almost an anti-competence. It's like the inverse of a competence.
Mm.
And the way to understand this is that your what sustains your experience of being a person, a separate self, what we would call a nafs, a self, a person in the world, a persona, we've said it's basically your conditional motive that's churning all the time, that's being held up by your internal dialogue. The first thing you must understand about your internal dialogue is that it's layered. That the bits of internal dialogue that most profoundly produce your life experience, your sense of who you are, aren't things that are being repeated deliberately, consciously. I mean, it's not the ramblings that are going on in your head as you're walking down the road. It is what happens when you suddenly stumble on, as you're walking down the road. Let's assume you come across a dead dog, which has been dead for quite a while and is now really stinking, and there's maggots coming out of every orifice.
Mm.
How would you respond? What would happen, do you think?
I would be repulsed.
You'll be revolted, repulsion. Do you understand?
Mm.
So there's the things that most deeply define who we are is our revulsion, our kind of disgust. Those things they're not conscious, they're not deliberate. They come out of your guts. It's bits of internal dialogue that are operating so deeply, they don't ask permission to enter your consciousness. They just arise. They have an impulsive force about them. They come from depth. Those are the most profound bits of our internal dialogue. The ones that produce, that we don't even know they're there, but our body knows they're there because our body produces the feelings associated with it. The body hears them. They whispered so quietly you don't know they're there, but just it's these strong experiences that, no. If you then say, well, let's say, I mean, does everybody have exactly the same response to a dead dog that stinks with maggots crawling out of its nose? And actually, some people don't. There might be some people that find it interesting. They're curious about it. I mean, it's true that there are things that would viscerally repulse you that would be completely, for another person, irrelevant, and for a third person, interesting.
Mm.
So why is it that the one thing repulses you and another person finds it interesting? Because in your past, in your kind of biographic experience, something happened to you where you were taught that is chacha, that is bad, and you are bad if you play with this thing, and you're a bad boy, and so these things are kind of traumatized into us, burnt into our consciousness at depth, and it's layered. When you get quiet, you're going deeper and deeper into these layers. You start hitting the bits of your internal dialogue that previously you weren't aware of. And you then have a cathartic experience. It might be like a deep experience of disgust or nausea, completely irrational, you know. That catharsis, something clears out, and then after that, that thing no longer bothers you, it's gone. Then there's something at the next layer is under that. So in a sense, it's an undoing job, this thing of silencing. It's not a doing job. Gaining depth, clearing your attention so that you can become more and more aware of what's actually there is an undoing job. It's a bit of decoding your conditional motive and therefore your conditioning. You know, so in that sense, it's not the same as developing a skill. Developing a skill is a cumulative thing. This is a taking away thing. It's a stripping off layers thing.
Sheikh, thank you very much. That's the conclusion of chapter 25.